Hey guys, I'm bringing you a little overview slash review on my Hom Basilisk R. This thing retailed for about $390 and it is a pretty great buy depending on the condition and how much you pay for it. So this was actually my first entry into the higher end knife world. I usually stuck with like mid-range zero tolerances or your Benchmades or your Spydercos. When it came to Bally's, you kind of have to spend the big bucks to get something worthwhile, in my opinion. This thing has a bushing system, which eliminates a lot of the blade play, or handle play rather. See, just a little bit. It eliminates most of the blade rub, but I'll get to that in a second. This is my second example of the Basilisk R with blue twill. I had to return my first one because the first one came with some inconsistencies on the handles. Some of the top layers of the blue twill were still on it, so it had this weird like plasticky layer which I didn't enjoy. But this one is pretty beautiful. As you can see. In terms of flipping, I think most of everything is personal preference. So whether or not you like the thickness of a knife, whether or not you like the balance of a knife is mainly personal preference. For me, this thing flips amazingly well. Although I do prefer the feeling of a replicant over it. Mainly just for the smoothness and the sound really is a big one for me, as you can hear. This Basilisk is probably the most quiet knife I own. You can't even hear it's just muted compared to some other knives, as you can see or hear. The thickness definitely took some getting used to. I can do a little thickness comparison to the replicant. It doesn't seem a whole lot thicker, but it keeps it throughout the entire handles. And this right here is very narrow, so when you're doing tricks like index rollovers, it can sometimes be a little challenging to get a hold of this little space right here to start doing other combinations. For me anyway. Well, for me, so that's why I like a little bit more handle on the sides right here. But almost everything is personal preference. The handles are long enough for sure, and the blade is long enough, so you have a lot of real estate to flip on this thing. And if you like keeping it like sideways, it's a great knife for that, since this is so thick it'll want to keep in that direction constantly like this. So this is part of the video where I start ranting, because personally I am going to sell this knife. I've had some problems with this thing that you might be able to tell. So first things first, I have a huge problem with manufacturers putting fragile tips on their balisongs. These things are meant to be dropped, flipped, and roughhouse with. So I don't understand why a designer would put a fragile tip on there. I actually baby my things. I never flip these any of my higher end knives over concrete. I always flip over hardwood and a bed. And the fact that wood destroyed my tip kind of bums me out. And these are expensive knives, so fixing them is not cheap either. I contacted Jerry Hom. It is a $30 job or a $40 job to fix the tip, minus shipping costs. With shipping, you're looking at a $60 fix for a tip, which is ridiculous. It's unbelievable. That's too expensive. When you look at other warranties on other knife companies, for instance, Kershaw, Benchmade, Spyderco, they offer blade replacements on their knives for around $40, and that's complete replacements. They're not just fixing the tip. I think most other manufacturers should be able to adopt that. But that's just my opinion. I know Jerry probably runs a smaller shop, but this is in fact not a custom knife. This is a full-blown production knife. So I don't think throwing out replacement blades for even $50 would be that costly towards him. But I don't know. Another thing is, these are not that smooth in my opinion. I've oiled and greased this thing, and while it is smooth to a point, it cannot compete with my Covenant. Not even a little bit. Or even my normal rep. It just doesn't compete in smoothness. As well as this pivot system isn't durable. If I were to tighten, actually give me one sec guys. Okay, and I'm back guys. So I wanted to bring something up. This is probably the issue that's upset me the most out of this entire thing. But first I'll mention this latch. You can tighten down the screw right here and keep this stiff and it'll stay out the way, but keeping it loose doesn't make it catch, and it does get burrs on it like this. But like I said, you can just tighten down the screw right here and keep it stiffened. So that's another really big deal. You can always do a paracord latch as well. But yeah, anyway, so the biggest issue and the biggest gripe I have on this knife is the unreliable pivot system. And this is besides the tip. And the tip really peeves me as well. But the pivot system, for me, and I haven't heard anyone else say this, but I flip my knife a lot. And I've dropped it on hardwood and bedding. And I do that on all my knives and expect them to take it, especially when I buy them at this price point and they're made out of the materials they are. This has an unreliable pivot system. So on a good bushing system, like Spyderco does on their paramilitaries, or BRS does on all their valleys except for the bare bones, to my knowledge, you should be able to crank down the pivots and have there be no handle play, or little to no handle play, and no blade rub. But that is not the case with this knife. I can bear down the screw on the bite handle all the way. It'll end up being smooth. But on the safe handle, I screw it down just a little bit. Look at that, just a little bit. Oh, well, yeah. It was pretty loose actually. So, just screwing it down. Oh, the female side is spinning. So I screw it down just a little bit. It remains stiff. And that just means that this isn't applying equal force on the pivot, causing it to stick. And that's unacceptable on really any knife with the bushing system, but especially on a $400 Basilisk R. That's just crazy. And in order to keep the knife smooth, so for flipping, I have to unscrew it a tad, giving me, let's see, there we go. I have to unscrew it a little bit, giving me substantially more handle play than I would like for this knife, and giving me blade rub. So that's my biggest pet peeve with this knife, is that it's not very durable. It fits my flipping style quite well, and the aesthetics, in my opinion, are amazing. Like, it's such a wicked blade. When you compare it to like a Covenant, this Covenant's so subdued, and this is a more ostentatious knife, and it's really cool. But I can't recommend it, knowing that the tip is so fragile. The bushing system is unreliable. The latch gets in the way, and the warranty isn't there, in my opinion. And I think this knife has a huge following because when it's in good condition, it performs well. But for me, I can't recommend it, knowing that there's alternatives like the Max Ace, like the Replicant. But that is just one man's opinion. Maybe I wouldn't be so negative if mine came out well, but yeah. Anyway, guys, try not to roast me too much. That is my review. Peace.